How's it going, everyone? Welcome to today's webinar, bringing Selenium and Appium together. A quick intro. My name is Nick Brown. I'm a marketing manager here in the Boston office, specifically focused on cross-browser testing. And I'm going to let my other presenters do a quick intro as well.
Yes, thank you, Nick. My name is Ville Kreutzmann. I am a solution consultant for BitBar. I believe we are the newest in the SmartBear family, and we are happy to be a part of that. So yeah.
And I'm Dermot Caniff. I'm a solutions engineer in SmartBear. I'm based in Galway, and I help our customers in EMEA and worldwide integrating SmartBear tools into their systems.
Great, thanks, guys. And then we're just going to do some quick housekeeping items here around SmartBear. SmartBear tools are synonymous with quality across the entire SDLC, from planning and design to testing and monitoring. We were founded in 2009 in Boston, Massachusetts, and have grown to over 11 global offices encompassing North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. Over 6 million developers, testers, and operations professionals from 20,000 plus companies like Google, RBC, and Vineyard Vines use tools every day to deliver bug-free software. Our company of over 500 employees also provides 3 open source initiatives, 2 wildly popular open source tools, Swagger and SoapUI. As you can see here, it's a quick depiction of the different products that live within the SmartBear portfolio. Our portfolio spans through 6 different categories, with Plan, with HipTest and Swagger Hub, Create with Service V Pro, Collaborator, and Test Left, Test with SoapUI Pro, LoadUI Pro, Test Complete, Load Ninja, Cross-Browser Testing, and BitBar. Deploy with our partners here with popular solutions like AWS and Docker. Monitor with tools like AlertSite. And finally, manage and analyze with Zephyr. And we're just going to go through a quick agenda for today. We're going to give you a good overview of Selenium and Appium and what they are. Some of the pain points you may encounter when using Selenium and Appium, and then how SmartBear can help with those pain points, as well as a demonstration and a live Q&A session at the very end of the session. Before we kick things off, I do want to launch a quick poll just to understand how familiar you guys are with Selenium and Appium. So I'm going to launch that and give a minute for folks to respond, and then we'll kick this thing off.
So what's the weather like over there in Helsinki, Billy?
You know, I would say it's the usual. It's cloudy and gray skies. So.
Oh, it's the same over here in Galway.
Yeah. How about the US? Do we have sun there?
No, unfortunately not. It's quite similar. It's cold and rainy today, but hopefully the sun will peek through at some point.
Absolutely.
All right.
I have a colleague who's just come back from vacation in New Zealand, and he said it was coming into strong summer there. So we were all very jealous, bearing down on a cold winter as we are.
Yeah.
Seems like some folks on the call also have some cold weather as well.
Good to hear that we all have even planes here. So no one's having the sun.
Yeah,
exactly. We can all be cold together. Let's be cool. We'll just be cool. We'll call it cool.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone that responded to the poll. Really do appreciate that. And I will say, as we go through this presentation, if questions do come about, please direct them to the QA section within the Zoom platform. We'll be sure to try to address as many as we can. But if for some reason we aren't able to get to your question, we'll be sure to follow up with you after, or you can reach out to myself directly at nicholas.brown@smartbear.com. All right. Well, without further ado, let's kick this thing off.
Cool.
So we're just going to do a quick overview of Selenium and Appium and what they do. As some of you are familiar with it based off the poll with Selenium and Appium, but there are some folks out there that aren't currently working with them. So Selenium and Appium are very common frameworks that are used by developers and automation testers to test their website or mobile application against different browsers and devices. Selenium specifically is used to automate browsers on desktop and mobile devices to mimic the gestures or movements that a user may take on that specific browsers. And similarly, Appium is used to test against your native and hybrid mobile applications on different devices. And as I mentioned in the email or on the landing page, although they do have different names, they are very similar and considered almost at times in the same family. As you can see right here, we have two sample scripts, one of which is written in Selenium and one that is written in Appium. They're actually the same exact tests. They're just slightly altered differently to meet the requirements of either Selenium or Appium in the format that it needs to. But overall, as you can see, the naming conventions are slightly different, but it's very similar between the scripts. So if you know one, you essentially do know the other one. And, it's great to see that, they are so similar and almost live within that same family. And then I just wanted to showcase how Selenium and Appium both work nowadays. If you are working with a Selenium grid, as you can see here on the left, Selenium is working with the different browsers, and Appium is working with either emulators, or if you have an internal device lab, you may be working with some real devices. And Selenium interacts with the different web drivers, as you can see in the middle here, the browser drivers and the corresponding browsers. They are used here to, like I mentioned, mimic or automate the gestures or movements a user may take within a web application. And similarly, Appium does the same thing here, where it interacts with the Appium server and then can interact with either emulators or VMs, or if you have an internal device lab, it could mimic the gestures a user may take within your native application. So with that, it definitely does come with some pain points. As you work with, like I mentioned, either a Selenium grid or an internal device lab, or even a third-party solution similar to some of the tools that CrossBrowserTesting has, there are some pain points that you're going to hit. As you get started, you may be working with a grid or internal device lab, but there comes pain points as you try to expand your test coverage or the number of devices, and we're going to kind of dive into some of those pain points right now. So as on the right here, you can see a diagram of what a Selenium grid kind of looks like, interacting with the Selenium hub and then the different nodes and web drivers as mentioned in the previous slides. And some of the pain points that you're going to really hit here is there are certain browser providers that you're not going to be able to access, some obscure ones potentially like an Opera or some other ones out there. And then the other underlying issue that you're going to face is you're constantly going to be updating the browsers. There's always new browser versions coming out consistently, whether that be Chrome, Firefox, or IE. And with that, you're going to have to update the web drivers as well as your Selenium scripts to meet those updates that the browsers are putting out into the market. Another big pain point is there's no built-in network recording. So third-party tools, such as some of the ones that live within the cross-browser test or the SmartBear family, like CrossBrowserTesting, can help with stuff like that as you try to work through those network recordings. Also, there's no really easy way to share test results. As you run your tests through the Selenium grid and there's a member of team that was wondering how that test ran or if a test failed, there's no real easy way to display whether that test passed or failed internally. And then the biggest one is that there is an overhead cost. There needs to be someone internally that is an experienced individual who can maintain the Selenium grid. And especially as you look to expand the number of browsers and configurations you'd like to test on, it becomes it just multiplies and it becomes inherently tough to upkeep, and you potentially have to grow that team internally to maintain that grid.
I was that person in a previous life. I was tasked with automated testing in a previous job, and also the maintenance of our Selenium grid. And yeah, it was like 2 full-time jobs at once. So that was
exactly.
fun.
And that usually falls upon the tester to do the upkeep as well, and that really takes away from the testing itself.
Exactly.
Great. And then we're going to take you into some of the pain points that you may face with working with an Appium client-side execution or an internal device lab. First being, with the client-side execution, it is applicable to Appium and also to Selenium at times when you're running this internally, is that there's multiple layers to networks, your network, and that sometimes can cause flaky tests. And no one likes the flaky tests or dealing with that. And also you're depending on the network speed. So that's another big factor, is that you're really depending on your internal resources to ensure that these tests are running in a seamless, fast motion. And then the other one is there's no parallelism. So if you are working with an internal device lab and you're working with a client-side execution, you are only able to run these tests against one device at a time, which really can slow down your testing, as it does take some time to run those tests, as you could be testing against hundreds of devices at one time.
Yeah, exactly. And when you want to, let's say, scale that solution, you would need to start multiple sessions, right? So you have one-to-one connection, and when you start more sessions, you would get a little bit of parallelism, but not. It takes up resources from the local host, right?
And even if you're not worried about resources, you still have to architect that parallel solution, that ability to fire off multiple clients and hit the server simultaneously. So that's extra overhead on top of what you were already doing.
Absolutely, yeah. And client side perhaps is the most used way of executing. So you have your local host where you are sending commands over the internet to a device in the cloud, and even though the tests may be good, the network can really do some tricks on you and make so that the test fails in the worst case scenario. So
absolutely,
exactly. And then wanted to dive in also to the mobile devices. So you want to make sure that the accuracy of the devices is there, and to do that, you really do need the real devices, not emulators, which can cause some issues and overhead cost as well there. And I think that speaks to the breadth of the devices. Apple, Android, all the major providers are constantly coming out with new devices. So to keep up with that, your team needs to be constantly investing money into the actual cost of the devices, which inherently can drive up the cost, and it becomes tough to maintain. And that's where also the ops team comes into this, is there needs to be a whole dedicated team to maintaining and ensure the devices are actually up and running, and can withstand the testing that you're looking to do, and then having the variety of devices as well. So outside of some of the normal ones that you may not think of from the major providers, there's some devices that your users are coming from that you definitely need to test for.
Yeah, right. And then we as well, we have different versions and different manufacturers, and then we even have different OS versions. So from Android and iOS side that you may or may not want to test against. So that really, there's a quite big pool of different devices that you want to test against. And Appium supports emulators and also real devices. And if you really want the real life performance, you should consider using real devices, and as you said, they come with a extra cost. You have to acquire those devices, and but then if you have acquired them and have set up a internal device lab, then you have the real life memory limitations and CPU limitations. But then of course you should have the ops team or IT team maintaining that grid or internal device lab, and when you want to scale it, it also scales the ops team, right?
Perfect. So we've kind of laid out the pain points that you may face either now or as you look to get started with Selenium and Appium that you may face. And the question becomes, how can SmartBear help provide value where those pain points may live. And so tools like cross-browser testing, we our adventure, like we always try to deliver a perfect web experience. So cross-browser testing is the all-in-one testing platform that can run your automated, visual, and manual tests on the thousands of real devices and mobile browsers. So right now we have a little over 2,000 combinations of browsers and devices that you can run your tests on. If you're currently working with Selenium, you can seamlessly integrate those tests over to cross-browser testing to run against those, thousands of browsers and devices. And we also work with WebDriver IO, Protractor, NightShift.js, or other testing frameworks that you may be working with. So the idea here is that we want to seamlessly integrate within your workflow. And to further, pursue that, we also integrate with your CI tools. If you are working ones such as a Jenkins, a TeamCity, or some of the other CI integrations that are out there to run your entire suite. And finally, we do have also an API that allows you to manage, run, and report directly within your workflow for faster browser testing. And as I mentioned before, we not only do the Selenium aspect, but we also do allow you to run screenshot or visual tests. So you can run regression tests over time to see if there's any changes in the layout or images that may be on your site. But we also have the ability to run manual or live tests as you interact or try to replicate bugs that a user or someone on your team may have identified to then identify that issue and then hopefully fix it. And as you can see right here, we're going back to the diagram of how the original Selenium grid kind of looks like. And as you can see, there's multiple layers within here. With cross-browser testing, we try to say, let us do the heavy lifting. As you can see on the right here, this is how your Selenium would interact with the different browsers. And we really try to take your testing infrastructure and let us do the heavy lifting and maintain that for you. As Dermot had alluded to, it's a very time-consuming and job to maintain that. So we really want to help you out here. And then secondly, we have BitBar, which is the all-in-one mobile app testing platform. It was recently joined SmartBear, and similar to cross-browser testing, it allows you to run thousands of tests in their device lab or in the cloud against thousands of real Android and iOS devices. The real nice thing about BitBar is that it has unlimited device concurrency. So you could be running a parallel test, like Willie had mentioned, that you aren't able to do with the client-side execution. You could run up to 5 tests, or you can run 100 at once. So the nice thing there is it gives you the flexibility to really run as many tests in parallel as you would like. And then to further hit that point home is, we do have the cloud side execution. So it's faster and more reliable tests with BitBar. And we're also framework agnostic. So depending on what framework you're actually working with, whether that be Appium, as we've spoke about today, or some of the other ones listed here, such as Detox and Espresso, we also do work with that. And finally, similar, like I mentioned, to cross-browser testing, is we want to make life easy for you. So if you're working with the CI tools such as Jenkins, TeamCity, or some other ones, we also seamlessly integrate within those platforms or CI tools as well. I don't know, Will, if you would like to add anything more to here.
Yeah, sure. Just when you mentioned the unlimited device concurrency, so that's actually really thanks to the cloud side execution, which as far as I know is a one-of-a-kind solution that really eliminates the network problems from the client side. So when you're uploading your tests and applications to the cloud and really offloading the testing to that, then you will get faster and reliable tests, and more on that later. And then, as you mentioned, we are, as CBT as well, really flexible and acknowledge that every team and organization is different and use different tools and processes to do their testing, and really the testing solution should accommodate that and not the other way around. So yeah.
Yeah, and one final point as well is they do BitBar. We also have a API, so you can manage all the aspects, within your mobile development and test automation. So BitBar also does allow you to run your automation tests through their API.
Yes.
And then right here is just showing a quick depiction of what a client-side execution may look like compared to using the BitBar cloud and running those in parallel. So with parallel testing, you can run against a number of devices. So you're going to have more tests running. They're going to be faster and they're going to be more reliable.
Yeah. So on the top side there we have just as a comparison, we have the client-side execution where you have the local host and then you are sending commands over the internet to the device and then back to the local host. And we at BitBar also support that, just because it's also a good way of executing. You have your test locally and you will get your reporting locally. So some like that, but it doesn't scale that well. And for that we have then, when you want to scale, we have the cloud-side execution marked here with the red box, which really does do parallelization really well. So you are essentially offloading the testing to the cloud and uploading your application and your test in form of a zip file with all of its dependencies, and then running it in the cloud almost as a local setup in the cloud, and really using the same test suite against multiple devices of different kinds. So it's really fast and reliable as well.
Perfect. And with that, why don't we jump right into the BitBar platform?
Sure. I think we'll start with a small introduction of the BitBar platform, and then I think it was CBT, and then we'll see how they work together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. So are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
I can.
Perfect. All right. So I already went ahead and logged into the BitBar cloud. And right off the bat, we are treated with the dashboard. This gives a lot of useful statistics of our test runs that we have done and how they have fared against each other, and the success ratio, for example. Here on the right-hand side, we see the test runs that we have, or projects that we have going on. Going down here, we see more statistics of the projects, and going even further down, we can see the most failing devices and most used devices. Quite useful statistics to really start finding out on which devices you have any sort of problems. Here we can also see how many users we have connected to this main account, and on the right hand side we have the user specific settings. So here we have, for example, my account, where you can find your API key to do test runs over API, for example, your subscription details, access groups when you want to share projects with your teammates, for example. And then we have the help and documentation, capabilities creator to make test creation easier, your files library, from where you'll find all your uploaded zip files and applications. These are the files you will use to execute tests. They are located in the cloud, right? And then next to that, we have the invite team members. So you're able to invite how many team members you would want. We don't limit the users either. So you can create how many users you would wish under your main account, and they will all get the same rights as the main user. All right, so on the left-hand side, we have all the tools available in the BitBar cloud. So first off, we have the automation. This is where the magic happens, so to say. From here, you would create a test run, choosing the framework and the files and the devices you would like to execute against. More on that later. And then we have the manual testing. This is really an essential tool of any testing solution, to manually being able to verify a problem or just to manually test the application. So that's also fully available in our cloud. Under that, we have the AI test bot. This is, I would look at it as a third arm of testing. So it does exploratory testing, navigates the application, has some smart features, so it knows where it has been, and if it leaves the application, it knows how to get back into the application and start knocking on different doors and essentially finding bugs and so on. So it's a really good way to validate a build or do a smoke test, for example. Under that, we have the dashboard where we currently are, and under that we have our projects. So these are all the test runs that we have done in our cloud. So for example, we can go into this one here that I started earlier today. And here we can see we have four devices that we have executed against the same test. And going in further into that one device, let's see here. All right, so here we have the screen capture that we get from every test run. And then if the test is taking screenshots, they will be presented here. And then we have the Appium log and, for example, the console log and the device log as well. So really good things to use when you are looking into problems with your application. And then, of course, the CPU usage and memory usage, good as well when you are looking into optimizing your application and making, for example, battery consumption lower. Here we have the steps. Right now, this test only has one step, but the steps that your tests includes will be listed here, and you will see which ones have failed and which ones have completed. Any issues that our cloud has noticed with the application will be notified here. So for example, that it's slower than average or something like that will be under a worth checking box. And then you can download everything from the output files. All right. Last but not least, we have all of our devices available in the cloud. And as Nick mentioned earlier, we have thousands of devices, 350 plus unique device models and of different kinds and different API levels and so on. And these can be grouped together with so-called device groups for you to be able to faster select the right devices that you would want. So you can create this device group based on selected devices by manually clicking them and selecting them, or you can select them by filters. So you would have a dynamic group that then populates. If we add or if you get another device into the cloud, then this group would be populated with those devices as well. Really nifty feature. All right, so let's do a automation run here and see how that works. So for the sake of this example, let's do a Android run and Appium Android server side or cloud side, as we mentioned earlier, the way to really scale up your testing and make parallel tests. I've already gone ahead and uploaded my test suite, my zip file, and then also my APK. So I will select both of them. And let's see, yes, the cloud likes them. And here we can see that the zip file is used to run the test and the application is installed on the device. That looks good. And here we can manually select the devices we would like to execute against, or we can use a device group. So here, for example, we can choose the Android 601 phones that we have available and continue from there. And then we can give the project a name, for example, and the test run a name to make it more easily identifiable. We can specify any hook URL here, for example, and then test timeout, how long it will try out the test, and some different parameters. And after that, we can create this test run, and it starts chugging along. Here we can see that we have 11 devices currently executing and at the same time with the same test suite, right? So it's a really effective way of executing and makes it fast. Let's see here if we can get some statistics on how it has started. Waiting. I think I have bad Wi-Fi. Yeah, all right. Here we can see all of them have started at the same time, and few of them have taken a few more moments to set up. And we only have real devices in our cloud, so the setup times may vary as we have the real life CPU performance and memory limitations available. So, but it will give the real life performance, right? Yeah, that's the BitBar cloud.
Cool.
Great, thanks, Willie. And then I think we're going to pass it over to Dermot to jump into cross-browser testing.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to also share my screen, and similarly, let me know when you can see.
Yeah, looks good.
Yep, looks good.
Are we all seeing cross-browser testing?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is the test center. It's just our quick way into all of the functionality that you can get in cross-browser testing. First up, we've got live testing, and that is essentially what it says on the tin. Basically, if my browser has frozen, I will be very upset. Okay, so from the test center, we can go through to live tests. And basically, we would provide a URL here, and you can decide on the device that you're going to use. So for example, you could choose Windows or Mac, or you can go to mobile. You can specify real Android phones, real Android tablets, real iPhones and iPads. So we also have some simulators, but generally speaking, I think people kind of prefer to do their live testing on real devices here. And this is the full stack of available items. So for example, I could choose an iPad Pro, and we're going to use mobile Safari here because that's what you get on an iPhone or an iPad. And yeah, so an additional advanced option that we can add in here, we can record a video of what we're performing in our test, or we can specify a local connection. So cross-browser testing gives you the opportunity to establish an SSL tunnel into your own network. So for example, if you were testing a web application on your internal network, which isn't open to the public, maybe you're pointing your tests at an integration server and you haven't gone live yet, you can use this SSL tunnel. You can specify it here, and you can choose it from an active connection. So basically, you've got an agent running in your own network, and you can connect to it directly in your test. Okay. But in this case, this is an open application. So once I hit run test, we're connected to an iPad Pro in this instance, and a browser is launched for us. And then basically that is our interface for testing our application. Okay. So we can do all of the gestures that you would anticipate from a mobile device, and we can interact with links. And if our application requires functions like file upload, we can do that as well. We can also simulate certain activities, for example, hovering. If you were using a desktop version, a desktop browser, you can hover over links in order to pull down contextual dropdowns, etc. You can grab screenshots. If you haven't auto set video recording, you can record a video as you go. There's a variety of tools available here, and you can also, for mobile devices, you can rotate the device mid-test in order to see how your application whether your application is responsive or not. Okay. So then once you stop recording, you have your set of test results here. You can view the results. And in this case, I didn't do very much in the test, but if I go back out and we can look at a previous test, we'd be able to see any interactions. I haven't been very active recently at all. Okay, so basically any sort of interactions, any clicks, any activities, any checkpoints or validations that you perform during their test would be reported in the test logs, and you can run again, which just takes you back straight into the same interface, the same device, and you can perform your tests again. So that's great for kind of exploratory testing, or if you're using manual testing in your organization, this gives you exposure to a vast variety of devices on which to test your application. Now, the next item is screenshot tests, and this is where we give an example URL. So I'm going to put in w3.org, I think. And once you provide a URL, you choose a selection of browsers and platforms that you want to test on. So I'm just going to use a very small amount here. We can add additional information. So for example, if our application requires to log in, we can add that basic authentication or set up a login profile. We can submit additional Selenium scripts as well at this point, or we can send to Apply Tools eyes for visual comparison. But basically, once I run that test, it's going to load that URL with or without login credentials as you specify. And it's doing a visual comparison for each of the platforms that we specified. So it's loading, and then once it's loaded, we'll be able to do comparisons. So we'll just give that a couple of seconds, but the idea is that I can choose one of these panels to be my baseline, and then the other panels will show me any visual drift. And the analysis is based on the DOM of the object, unless you're using some visual comparison tool like Apply Tools. But primarily, we're going to track the effective DOM of the application, and we're going to show any sort of difference between the renderings, effectively, of the different platforms. Okay, so in this case, I can click here, I can open that and view the page as loaded. And I can set one of them to be my, so this is my base comparison browser, but I could set this as the base, and then we'll do all the other comparisons in comparison to Windows 10, Chrome 67 in this case. And up here, you'll see also our Lighthouse audit. So automatically you get this sort of fitness rating based on the Lighthouse service that Google provides, which gives you accessibility, for example, and SEO performance. And then you can also see the image diffs, and you can compare this test run to previous test runs. So you can use this as a sort of regression test for the visual comparison of your application. Then we have record and replay, which does exactly what you would imagine. You can pop in your URL there and start recording. Here's a previous test that I've done, and we can replay that script. And we can choose the platform on which we're going to replay. So for example, I could choose a Mac, and we're going to use Firefox. So when I replay that script, it's going to load that URL, and it'll perform all of the steps that I recorded earlier. And once we connect it to our instance, you'll see that happening. So we're successfully connected. And then once it's loaded its URL, we're going to use our Firefox instance to navigate around my web application, or well, the W3C application. Okay, so it's looking for a link here, and maybe they've changed their application. But as you can see, the test is highlighting a change here in the web application for W3C. And if that was an unintended change, then we would be able to flag it in our results. Now, the beauty of record and replay is that we can add any of these tests to a suite, and then you can schedule suites to run at specific times of the day. So if I go into the suite section here, we can create a new suite, and then we can define when this suite is going to run. So in this instance, I've got a suite based around that W3C test, and that last ran at about midnight, I think. And you can run it again manually, and you can check in on the latest results from the suite. You also get emailed about them if you set that as your notification method. And then finally, we have the automation section. Finally, for now, there's a few more detailed interactions that we could get into now, but just aware of time passing, I just want to move on to the automation piece where we're talking about Selenium. But here under automation, if I go to the Getting Started section, you can see some examples. There's some guidance here as to what to do if you're new to Selenium. You can set up your authentication, grab your authentication key and your username for the cross-browser testing service. And then this is kind of where we add significant value. We have the ability to choose our platform, choose our browser, and that could be a mobile device. So for automation, we've got real Android phones or simulated iOS devices, and we can choose one of these, choose a browser, and then we automatically generate a set of capabilities which we use to drive our remote WebDriver. So that leads me into the automation section. So I'm just going to minimize this so that you can see. This is a project that I have. I already had some, I had a TestNG test framework for testing my application. And we were using a local WebDriver. We were using Chrome driver and the Gecko driver to test my shopping application. And all I did was I swapped out the local drivers for a remote web driver, and I've provided the capabilities that were automatically generated for me on the cross-browser testing site. So in this case, we're going to run against Chrome on a Galaxy S9. So once I've set that up, I've actually committed all of this project into a Git repository, and I have set up a Jenkins job. So this Jenkins job pulls the information from my Git repository, and we're going to use Maven to run my testng test. And because, imagining for a moment that we're in a company that has both a web application and a mobile application for interacting with its services, I want to be able to test my web application and also test my mobile app within the same task. So what we can see here is a BitBar plugin for Jenkins, and it would be the same for any sort of CI tool. I just happen to have Jenkins installed on my system. But basically, we can set up the same scenario that Ville set up in BitBar itself. So I'm setting up my project. I've set up the OS type, so we're going to test against Android, and I've specified the samples that we're going to use as well. Now, for me, I'm running maybe a regression test, so I just want to run on as many devices as possible to make sure it all works. So in that case, I'm going to use a Samsung pool of 51 devices for my tests. And because we're running all this from Jenkins, I can schedule that whenever I want. I can run that whenever I want. So if I kick off that build now, we'll see the build starts there, and I'll just pop open the console output for that.
Yeah, a note on that. So it's actually the same test that I've started manually in the cloud that we are kicking off there from the BitBar side.
Exactly. And I didn't want to load my Jenkins node running a one-to-one test against a single device. I want to run against many devices. So it makes sense for me to start a server-side test, as Ville articulated. When you can send that APK and the concomitant tests into the BitBar cloud, you have access to their entire network and a good level of parallelism across a vast array of devices.
Yeah, and the Jenkins plugin is just one way of starting the test. So, for example, you can start it via a shell script or a API that works as well. So, multiple options.
Or I could have incorporated it into my testng framework as well. But this just works for me, so I'm going to stick with this. So we're running our test suite. And now if I go back into cross-browser testing, we can see I've got a session open here, and I've got one automated parallel. My particular profile, I've got 25 maximum concurrent parallel sessions that I can run in test. Now, the licensing is different. You can pay for different levels of access, but in mine, as long as I don't go over 25, I won't be paying more money. So now I've opened a browser on Galaxy S9 in this case, but my testng test is also running against iOS. So we're effectively running the same test on the same web application using different devices. And so once we've connected and we've got a session, essentially it just pulls up my web application. You can see it loading there. If I go back to the Android device, yeah, we're performing our test, going through the procedures of logging in and purchasing and validating a purchase. And then once those have completed, and hopefully they do complete, we're on a demo. Anything could happen. It's exciting.
And with testing, we are supposed to find problems. So I guess it's good if it doesn't work.
Exactly. If everything passed all the time, we wouldn't be doing our job.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay. So I'm really hoping that iOS device session comes back and we recognize the application, but it might not. So what I might do is I might fire that off again. But yeah, the idea is that once we run through our cross-browser testing test here, we get a video, we get our pass or fail status is marked, and we do this through the API from my test-ng test. And then once that's complete, basically Jenkins will go and it will run my BitBar test. So let's see what happens now. Okay, so going back into Jenkins. Yeah, we have a slight failure here in terms of setting up my session, I think, but if I were to kick that off again, what we might see is something a little bit more like this. So this is a successful run against both my cross-browser testing instance and my cloud instance. And yeah, if I had spent more than the 24 hours I had setting up my cross-browser testing tests, they might be a little less flaky. But yeah, basically what you get when you run successfully against both of those items is you get this link in your build history, which gives you access to your BitBar cloud results.
Yeah, and this is using the BitBar plugin for Jenkins. So
exactly. So we can just link directly from Jenkins into BitBar, and we can analyze what's been going on. So because the idea is that we send this off and we rely on BitBar to run it across potentially a vast array of devices, and that can take some time, but Jenkins is fine. It finishes up and we can link directly to the status and also to the results of those tests.
Yeah, right. So here we can see that we have 51 devices that have executed, some of which have failed and some of which have executed successfully.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps here we would see that we have some devices that we would need improvement on, and yeah.
So if we drill down further, we have the same level of reporting that Ville showed earlier on.
Exactly.
And the full Appium log and our screen captures as well, and some metrics around performance and memory usage.
Yes, and even the console log for every specific device. So
exactly. So I'm going to kick that off, and hopefully we can come back and see that happening. But the idea is there basically that you can see from Jenkins we can run cross-browser testing and BitBar tests across both of our presences, whether it's mobile or web, for a single organization. And that's very powerful, obviously. If you've got development in both directions, you want to be able to cover it from and schedule it and automate it as much as possible, potentially from a single source. And that's where a CI/CD tool like Jenkins, and not just limited to Jenkins, of course, can play a large part. It also allows you to integrate cross-browser testing with what you may already have in place for testing your applications. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Really do appreciate that. And I think, it really goes to show, how powerful these two platforms are when they are working together to test, both your mobile app, but also your mobile web. And with that, we do have a few minutes left. So I don't know if Darren, if you want to kick the sharing back over to myself, and we can maybe answer some of the questions that some of the users may have or have had the presentation.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
Perfect. Awesome. And before we kick off the Q&A session, I did want to launch one last poll. If you would like to be followed up with from a SmartBear expert to learn a little bit about either one of the products or maybe both, just let us know in the poll question.
Ironically, as soon as I stopped sharing there, my Jenkins build started working, and we now have live testing in BitBar. So
nice. Awesome.
So I could actually put that up on the screen maybe, and we can do our Q&A around that. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool. Okay. So in my BitBar project, here we've got our devices. We've got 52 devices set up. They're all Samsungs. And this is, as before, it's showing us our ramp up time and execution time, shows what's running, and we can go back and we can monitor the execution status of all of these. So 2 have failed and 49 are in progress.
Yeah.
And as and when those results come in, we can drop into any of the devices and see what's going on with them. For some of these devices, you can actually drop in and see live, from what I understand.
Yeah, it takes a little bit before it has set up the environment, but after that you will be able to jump in and see the live view of the execution. So
exactly,
it's also available. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Awesome. So there are a few questions in here for the attendees. If there are other questions, please do pop them into the QA session or section of the Zoom. But I think we can answer a few of the questions that come through. So Benjamin had asked, we're using a different client browser / device cloud provider at the moment. Can you tell us a little more about features that your competitors don't provide? Because honestly, I don't see much difference. So I think I can cover a little bit of this. So some of the biggest differences between at least cross-browser testing, and Willie, I'll let you speak more to the BitBar side, just knowing you're the matter expert there. But for cross-browser testing, yes, the tools are very similar. One of the biggest differences is our price point. We are definitely cheaper than a lot of the competitors out there. So that definitely is enticing to a lot of users that do switch over to us, as the services, if not the same, not better. But we also do have some features that they don't provide. Dermot had highlighted a few of those, being record and replay. So for your non-technical user that's looking to speed up their testing, we do have the ability to provide a tool or feature that allows the user to manually click through, record the test, and then run that in parallel against different browsers and devices. So they may not need or have the Selenium background, but they do have a way to speed up their testing. Another feature that we do offer within our screenshot engine is we do allow for full page screenshots. A lot of our competitors only do above the fold. So we're able to capture the entire screen from there. I don't know, Dermot, am I missing any other big ones?
I think you covered it off pretty much.
Yeah, and another net new feature that we recently released that's available on, say, more plans than some of our competitors is our headless testing feature.
Absolutely.
Allows automation users to test a lot faster. We've seen tests or results from our customers say that they're running their tests 3 times faster. So as you look to test quicker and validate code before it goes into production, you can utilize our headless browsers, which was released just, I think, about a month ago. So definitely check that out if you're looking for a way to speed up your tests, as we've seen some tests go from 6 hours down to almost 2. So it's really substantial in the amount of time that we save with our headless browsers. And then, Willie, I don't know if you want to cover the mobile application side. I know one big thing is that you're able to upload tests, so you're not relying on your network or Wi-Fi to then run those tests.
Sure. So yeah, that's exactly right. So we have the cloud side execution, which enables you to upload your tests and basically use the same test against multiple devices, as we've shown in these demos. And that really helps with the flakiness of the tests as well. And then we of course have the flexibility of our cloud, so we don't limit you to any specific tools, but you are free to use whatever you have in your environment.
Great. So look, there was another question about a competitor. Hopefully we were able to answer that in terms of browser stack specifically. One of the big things being price point, but also our level of support. We have an entire team dedicated of developers and engineers that are, on our support team. So when you're talking with someone from a cross-browser testing perspective, you're talking with an actual technical user. So there's no layers that the user needs to go through to get a true answer. You can go and talk through the chat bubble that lives on the site, as well as in the application, to get any kind of answer you may have. or question answered that you may have when it comes to cross-browser testing. Let's see.
There's a question from Manu there, Manu Sharma. My application works on Windows AIX, supports web browsers like IE, also can be accessed from mobile devices. So how this tool, which I think from the context is cross-browser testing, is helpful for me to cover end-to-end testing for all supported interfaces. So the idea here is that part of your end-to-end testing would be to test the user interface, and whether that's based on a functional, maybe unit testing approach, or whether you're doing some sort of UAT type testing, you would need some sort of browser-based test in order to validate that, and ideally a browser-based test that would run on a variety of different browsers and devices. And that's where cross-browser testing gives you access to multiple devices, so you could run, in the manner that I've shown, you could run the same test that you developed locally across a vast array of devices, potentially in parallel, which maximizes your reach, but also shortens your development time. And in terms of the next part, which is, can I use my old scripts? That depends on what your old scripts are written in. And if you have any questions around that, please do get in touch with us. And we can arrange a call about that. How can I create a framework from scratch that will use a both tool? Well, there's several types of framework that you could use, like JUnit or TestNG, and you can usually find quick starts for all of these projects on GitHub if you do a search for quick start or bootstrap or something along those lines, and the test framework that you're looking for. So TestNG quick start, for example.
Great, thanks, Dermot. So I'm just going to answer one quick one here asking about a recording. Yes, there will be a recording sent out to all registrants. So you will have a recording on hand of today's presentation. And then let's answer one more. Well, yeah, this is an interesting one for BitBar. It says from an anonymous attendee, does BitBar allow for beta versions of mobile OSs to be installed?
So we have a selection of devices in our cloud with different OS versions, and I believe that you can, as long as you can get those OS versions on a real device, you can also get them in the cloud, be it on a dedicated device or something similar.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Just to answer Sergey's question there, so I would say that I think it's a BitBar question. So as long as you are able to write a test that can do that jump between the web page and the application, then you can run that also in the BitBar cloud. So I wouldn't see that as a problem.
Yeah, and just to recap that question is it possible for test interaction between website and the mobile app? I mean, the following scenario, website waits for that send message action from a mobile app test clicks on, let's say, send message button, check the website, reacts correctly.
Yeah.
So it does seem like that is possible.
If you can test that locally, then you can test it also in the BitBar cloud.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, I do want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We are at the top of the hour. I wanted to thank you both for giving a great presentation and demonstration of the two different platforms, as well as when they work together, how powerful they can be. And I also do want to thank the attendees for showing up today to learn a little bit more about Selenium and Appium and how SmartBear can help out. And to that, I will let everyone go and have a fantastic day.
Yes,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.